Picard. Welcome one and all, we are gathered here today to discuss Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 2, this one entitled Disengage. If you are new here or have just possibly forgotten, we will be going into some spoilers both in Episode 1 and Episode 2 in this video, so if you don't want any of those, you may want to duck out now, otherwise consider this your warning. If you remember from my first video, I was a little bit underwhelmed as far as the premiere for this season goes. That being said, the first two episodes of Season 1 and 2 kind of lulled me into a false sense of security, and it really let me down after that, so I might just have my guard up. Coming into the premiere, I really did enjoy a lot of elements, but there were certain things that just kind of slogged it down. Happy to report this episode was a lot better in my opinion. There were only a couple of moments that felt like they were just dragging their feet. I feel like the stuff on the Titan was the best of the show, and every time we cut back to the Rafi storyline, it just kind of slowed things down. It just felt like every time they cut to that, it was just a moment of, come on, I was just getting invested in this story. I want to see where we're going. I understand that's something that happens in this long-form 10-hour storytelling, so I'm happy to see when and how these connect, especially because that storyline really picked up steam towards the end. Going back to the beginning of this episode, we finally learned the name of the character we met last episode, Beverly Crusher's son. It is Jack. I guess it wasn't actually revealed in Episode 1, so if you watched my video and were spoiled on that, I'm sorry, but it was kind of all over the internet, so I didn't realize it wasn't in the episode. Obviously named after Beverly's first husband, the father of Wesley, and it is revealed later in this episode that, again, one last chance for spoiler duckouts, he is Picard's son. Now, we don't entirely know whether or not this is a biological thing or if this is a genetically engineered thing. Thoughts on that later. So we kick things off 2 weeks in the past with Jack on the Helios. No Beverly in sight. I have to imagine she was off doing some more medical things. And he is in essence doing some black market stuff. Kind of reminiscent of that episode of DS9 where Quark got involved in arms trading with his cousin Gayla. Similar sort of situation, except he's pretending or using the pretense here of selling medical supplies and medical equipment, but he's also selling weapons. I guess he's trying to be some sort of morally gray character, but also do good at the same time because he is still interested in getting them those medical supplies. He later tells our characters that Beverly was all in on this. We don't get her confirmation on that. We get to see here that the ship was actually targeted for some reason. The arms trader who is doing this deal with Jack Crusher actually is shown to be calling it in like, I found the boy, I found the ship, whatever he says. So we do know that this tip was called in, and ever since this has led to the Helios being tracked by all sorts of different people. Jack here mentions that there's been Klingons after him. There has actually been Starfleet members. Whether or not they're truly Starfleet officers, Section 31, somebody pretending to be Starfleet, he says they keep changing faces. I have to imagine there's one group that's kind of rotating or pretending in here, possibly a loose alliance or possibly some sort of subterfuge. It was nice to get this backstory of Jack, and then we find out a little bit later that he goes by a lot of different names, all with the initials JC. So it was absolutely really nice to see that backstory instead of just kind of shunting him into the story and moving forward. Once we do catch up with the present, if you remember, our characters were trapped on a failing Helios with a Shrike just outside. The Titan had already left range, and the Nebula has pretty much fried all the systems on the Helios. We do get to see a very fantastic Captain Picard, Admiral Picard, although this is referenced here that history remembers you as a captain. He actually takes some initiative. He does some stuff on his own here. He goes around and has the foresight to put up transport inhibitors just in the nick of time because the Shrike with some sort of amber-looking transporter system, Cardassian maybe, tried to beam him out. Picard was just in time, prevents this. That means they can't be transported off, so they try to kind of tear the ship apart with their tractor beam, pull it in, so that they're forced to board manually. At the same time, we have 7 of 9 on the Titan trying to convince Shaw that they need to go in and save these 2 legendary members of Starfleet. He's not having it. Eventually, he is convinced into helping. Maybe he's not the bad character that he is played out to be. I saw a lot of people, myself including, kind of relating him to Jellicoe. He seems more like that captain from Star Trek 3 when they're stealing the ship, who was in charge of the Excelsior Excelsior, the by-the-book guy. I don't know where this is going. This episode in particular has already started to make me like Shaw a heck of a lot more, and I really hope we get to see him grow and we get to experience things through him. I hope he's not being basically raised as a pig for slaughter to die in episode 3 or something. That's the main plot here. Eventually he comes to the aid in one of the coolest scenes I've seen in quite a while in Star Trek, where the tractor beam is pulling in the Helios and they warp in. The Titan A warps in between the two ships, disrupting the tractor beam. That was kind of a cool scene and probably not something we would have gotten to see if they were doing this with models. CG, 1 point for you. One downside, aside from the darkness of the filming, is I feel like they're kind of populating space with a bit too much. Obviously, the effects weren't there in the original Star Trek or TNG or any of the TV shows, really. I feel like sometimes they might put a little too much effort into making space crammed full of gases, nebulas, anomalies, things of that nature. But it does make sense to the plot. We did need to have a nebula here. We had to have something disrupting communications, disrupting systems, probably for a Wrath of Khan-esque kind of hunt next episode. Not sure if that's where they're going. That's where I'm assuming. So once we get all the characters back on board the Titan, including Beverly Crusher, who is in bad shape, she's out of commission for most of the episode. We spend a good deal of time here with our crew of the Titan A kind of debating what they're going to do. Shaw absolutely wants to do things by the book. Jack Crusher is a criminal. Why not turn him over to the people who are suggesting he has wronged them? Picard obviously doesn't want to do this. This is Beverly's son. He probably has some personal issues here as well. It's good to see that dynamic. It's good to see 7 of 9 kind of be the bridge between their 2 points of view. And it's good to see Shaw isn't the prototypical captain. He has his own style, but he is still a good guy. We end up learning the thing that pretty much all of us assumed from day one. This character is revealed to be Jean-Luc Picard's son. Now, I did mention I'm not sure if it's biological. Probably it is. I have thoughts here. Why was Beverly so intent on keeping him away, not only from the crew of TNG, not only from Picard himself, but outside of Federation space? And this is coupled with some of the stuff we saw at the end sequence of this episode and the first episode, because those didn't change. We had DNA sequencing, we had a positronic brain mapping, and we also had a brain scan of what looked to be kind of the Irrimatic syndrome that we saw at the end of TNG. What I think may have happened is Beverly did some sort of genetic manipulation here, whether or not it's full-blown cloning, trying to combine various DNA techniques, and I don't think this is necessarily plausible. What if she was also combining genetic research with transferring positronic neural nets into an organic body? Don't necessarily think that's the case. I do think if there was genetic shenanigans going on, that would give her a big reason to stay outside of Federation space, as that is banned within the Federation, at least last we heard. Whether for his benefit or just for research, I don't know why that would be the case, but that could be a big key component as to why he is so sought after. Towards the end of the episode, where Riker, realizing they're running out of time to turn over this kid, needs to go down and figure out, is this truly Jean-Luc's son? I don't understand why they couldn't just take a DNA sample and test it. Apparently, the only real way to get this answer quickly or fast enough is to ask Beverly herself. We get to see a very, very nice scene on the bridge where Beverly looks at Picard and they have an unspoken conversation. It's never explicitly stated by Beverly, yes, Jean-Luc, he is your son. It's basically they look at each other and they know. I believe this is probably just a deep understanding between two characters. It could potentially be remnants of that telepathic connection they had in season 7 of TNG. I don't know if that was the case or not. Very, very interesting though, because it was a very emotional scene with no actual dialogue. And that's something that, if this was a Discovery or prior Picard era show, probably would have been filled with a lot of emotional and flowery dialogue, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing, but I think it's a hell of a lot more effective between these two characters with their deep history the way that they did it. We also got to see a lot more Easter eggs in here. We got to see that the shuttle they had taken from the Titan A was called the Savick, clearly a reference to Savick from the original Star Trek films. And, as we learned in a little ancillary stuff they put out on Instagram and whatnot, she was captain of a Titan in the past, so that was a good little nod to that. The text, the font in the red looked a little bit like the shuttles of the TOS era, as well as it kind of reminded me of when they painted HMS Bounty on the Klingon ship in Star Trek 4. Not sure if that was a reference to that, but it kind of reminded me of that. The Rafi storyline, let me get to that a little bit, because this was, in my opinion, the weakest part of the episode, but it was a much needed needed part. It dealt with Rafi's aftermath of having to go into the underworld again, putting herself back into the situation that she had pulled herself out of, her drug addiction, all of that stuff, and she had to reconvene with her ex-husband. She has a very strained relationship with her son and her granddaughter, and this was basically her choice. Either go towards the underworld, find out what's going on with the attack on the Federation, or you can get back in touch with your son. I'm not going to do both of them for you. You have to choose. She chooses to do her job and to go after the person that just destroyed that Federation embassy or the Federation recruitment center in that big attack at the end of episode 1. The person who leaked the information to the Federation was Sneed, a kind of creepy Ferengi guy. One thing that was really off-putting to me, and I don't know if this was on purpose, he had the regular Ferengi makeup, his lobes weren't that big, but he had stubble. And it was exceedingly creepy to me to see a Ferengi with stubble. Maybe it's just because that wasn't something we really saw in the past, but that really gave him an air of there's something wrong here. Rafi and Sneed go through this back and forth. Actually a pretty decent scene. I'm very on these underworld scenes and shows. They're a little played out and a little contrived at this point, but it was a good scene, good acting between them. Turns out that she goes through this lying process, pretends she's working for the Romulan guy. He knows that's not true because he just so happens to have this guy's head on the shelf behind him. She tries to get out of there. Keep in mind she had to take some drugs, so she's not on her A game right now. As she's failing this, someone comes in and starts chopping off heads. Surprising absolutely nobody, Worf was her handler the whole time. It was great to see him. He only really uttered one word at the end of the episode, so it seems like they're slowly building the reintroduction of our TNG crew over several episodes. That's kind of where we left both storylines. The Shrike and the Titan kind of at odds. The Titan A pieces out into the nebula, the Shrike following along. Rafi and Worf are getting out of Dodge, so presumably they're going to meet up soon. One thing I haven't yet mentioned, we finally get to meet Amanda Plummer's Vadic here. I know a lot of people are probably going to feel that she's overacting or something. She was fantastic in my opinion. I do very much enjoy her overacting style. Not sure where this is going, not sure who she's going to be. She was smoking, and I'm not entirely certain. This very much reminded me of something. Not going to really go into that much right now because I haven't looked that deeply into it, but it did remind me of a possible connection to someone and something else. Really liked her. Can't wait to see more of her. Really liked our introduction to Worf. Really liked that scene between Beverly and Jean-Luc, and I'm glad that didn't fester over several episodes. Now we just need to discover why and how this happened, why he's being looked for, and who the heck Amanda Plummer is. And I believe there's also a lot more stuff going on. That attack on Starfleet, that attack on the Federation, don't really think that's connected to the whole trying to find Jack Crusher. Maybe it is. I think there's a lot more going on right now than has been even touched upon. Kind of upset that there was no updated credits at the end. I was led to believe the end credits of each episode were supposed to change with kind of clues to upcoming plot points. If that's not the case, I'm going to be a little upset because it was a hell of a lot of fun combing through those last episode. But all in all, this was a definite improvement from last episode and a hell of an improvement from the first 2 seasons. I can't wait to see where they're going next, but what did you think? Did you like this episode? Are you staying away from Picard because of what's come before? And where do you think this season is going? Leave all your thoughts below, like, share, subscribe while you're down there, and until next time,
good afternoon.